Welcome back. Chicago's pension crisis is getting some national attention. Last week, we reported that Mayor Johnson's chief financial officer sent a memo to the governor's office warning that a police and fire pension bill he signed would cost the city $11 billion over 30 years with no way to pay for that and would make those funds, quote, technically insolvent. Governor Pritzker did sign the bill, claiming the mayor never called him to oppose it. And this weekend, the Wall Street Journal weighed in on an editorial titled, quote, Chicago pensions on the brink. In part, they said, quote, this is what happens when public unions essentially run city and state government while Mr. Johnson and Pritzker campaign against President Trump. Their fiscal houses are burning down. And joining us now are Paul Vallas once again and State Senator Robert Martwick, a Democrat from the Northwest Side who authored the Police and Fire Tier 2 pension bill. Welcome, Robert. Welcome back, Paul. Now, you're saying there's some dispute over the numbers. $11 billion is the total cost, but the cost of taxpayers is closer to around $6 billion.
According to the city's numbers. Yeah, there's different ways to state the numbers, right? The present cost, the first year cost is $52 million. It grows over time. But the total of payments would be 6.5.
And you explained to me, you understand the financial issues in the city, the pension issues, but this was needed to get into federal requirements with these police and fire employees. And if you didn't do something now, it would be more costly down the road. So how do you respond to what the Wall Street Journal is saying?
Well, listen, anybody who looks at Chicago's financial problems and the funded liability of their pension system should be alarmed. I certainly am. The question is what needs to be done about it. And every single problem that this state has is because leaders of the past chose not to make the difficult decisions timely. Right? The worst decision is not the difficult decision of whether you raise taxes or cut spending or how you pay for your pensions. The worst decision is not making any decision at all, and that's been the history. What this bill does is it forces that difficult decision onto the city of Chicago, so they must make those decisions now. That is the best protection for the taxpayers because the cheapest it will ever be to solve the problem is today. Would have been much cheaper yesterday. It will be far more expensive tomorrow. We need to act now, and that's what this bill does.
And Paul, and this is Tier 2, so this is for police and fire employees hired after 2011 because they were getting a bit reduced benefits than their counterparts, but now this is bringing them in line. Paul Vallas, do you believe this was necessary?
2 points. Whether it's $6 billion or $11 billion, you saddled the city with $6 billion to $11 billion in unfunded liability that taxpayers are going to have to bear. Secondly, from what I've read, my conversations with the Taxpayers Federation of Chicago and my conversations with Mike Lennon from WirePoints, there was an alternate compromise there which talked about creating like a fund that would cover those individuals who are somehow penalized because of obviously the contrast between Social Security benefits and regular benefits. The bottom line is this is another unfunded liability, and the fundamental problem that they've had at the state level is they continue to impose mandates that are not funded. Right now, Illinois has a pension liability that is almost twice California's, and we lead the nation. And if you take a look at Chicago's unfunded pension liability, it almost equals the unfunded pension liability of all but one of the surrounding states. So clearly you have a real problem.
And if you look at municipal pensions across the country, Chicago and Illinois rank in the top 10 in terms of most underfunded. And in fact, the city CFO said that the police and fire funds could be technically insolvent now already. So
they already were.
What about that criticism about the funding? Why pass an unfunded mandate and not help the city out from Springfield?
Yeah, well, and I think we should help the city out from Springfield, and it's something I've advocated for since day one. I've been able to achieve victories in terms of funding for CPS. But what I would say is this. It is not saddling the city with a debt. I think that's wrong because that debt already existed. The only thing that this did was it made that debt transparent so that we can account for it and pay for it. That debt existed. The longer you hide it, as I said, the power of compound interest, the longer you kick the can down, the more expensive it will be to the taxpayer, especially when you are as underfunded as the city of Chicago is. That creates the need to address your problems now. The worst thing you can do for the taxpayer is ignore that problem.
You know, who's hiding the debt? Every publication out there has been talking about the debt. CWB, WirePoints, Joe Ferguson, the Inspector General, now the head of the Civic Committee. What they did was they increased Chicago's unfunded pension liability from $36 billion to $46 billion. Okay, maybe less, $41 billion. And right now, the aggregate city pensions Aggregate city pensions are funded at 25% what the obligations are, and the firefighters' pension is now in the teens, and I think it's my understanding that they had to borrow this money, or they're going to have to go out and borrow this money to make their payments.
That has to do with the fact that the property tax bills have been late to go out because of some of the problems the county has
18%
had.
funded.
We are now actually at a point where Chicago Police and Fire are receiving at least the amount of money in that they have to pay out in benefits, so they're not forced to sell assets. Borrowing was to cover the shortfall in the late collection of property taxes. But the fact that they are as underfunded as they are means that we need to act now. No better example of that can be had than what happened to Chicago public schools under Mr. Vallas. They skipped $2 billion. I confirmed this with Chicago Teacher Pension Fund today. From 1995 to 2005, skipped $2 billion of payments. That created $13.5 billion of debt, and it requires $1 billion a year in debt service now, instead of assets that could go in to providing special education for our students. So one second, Paul. The important lesson here is, if you owe, act now, make the tough decisions now, don't kick the can. This was a negotiated settlement in 2019 that was promised to Chicago police and firefighters. This is the fulfillment of a promise that was made when this bill was passed in 2019, and it should have been passed in 2019. We already lost 6 years to pay for it. This puts it on the books so we can start paying for it.
All right, so now he's mentioning
I have to respond. And
when you were the head of the
right,
CPS.
We've talked about this all the time. This is the usual stuff that they say. Number one, when you had the School Reform Act of 1995, they consolidated the pension levies, but they provided for a continued appropriation tied to actuarial level funding. So when I left the district, it was at 104% funded, and 2 to 3 years later, when it fell to 90% funded, Arne Duncan began to make payments again. Then in 2008, they did a pension holiday. So I hear this stuff all the time.
So you were gone in 2008.
Yeah, exactly. Well, obviously. I was in New Orleans rebuilding schools. But let me respond. You talk about kicking the can down the road. You've been chair of the Illinois House and Senate pension committees. The state's unfunded liability during that period has grown from $94 billion to $142 billion. How do you explain that?
Well, that's easy. That was the design of the Edgar Ramp in 1995. We've made every pension payment, including, Paul, we've made additional pension payments. We've made payments above what was required by the statute. Certainly, it is not what needs to be actuarially required. We need to make more than what we're currently paying. But as you well know, I'm one of 178. So to put the thing on me, I didn't get to make those decisions. I don't get to craft the budget. I argue for full funding of our pensions, but I get what I can get.
All right. So what's the way out right now, though? Let's talk about the way out.
Let me suggest 2 things that you can do right now that is well within your power to do in Springfield. Number one, consolidate the pension investments, the Chicago pension investments, under a professional board, because right now, over the last 20 years, Chicago and the state have been getting a return on their investment that falls far short from other states have been going, because the funds it's political. Right now, you have the Chicago Teachers Union deciding who to invest with because they want to punish Israel, for example. So they want to bar investments from anything related to Israel.
This is the BDS movement.
And here's the second thing you could do that could help save the city pension funds right now. That could buy you time. You could provide equity funding for the Chicago Teachers Retirement System in Springfield. In other words, right now, the Chicago Teachers Retirement System gets 32% funded by the state, downstate 98%. If you did that, the Chicago pension levy, hear me out, the Chicago pension levy could then be shifted to the city system.
Just to clarify this for viewers, is that basically Chicago taxpayers are paying for their teacher pension.
Exactly.
All other municipalities in the state have the state. A couple seconds.
I was just going to say, see, there's something that we both agree on.
You agree.
Right?
You want to make that happen.
Absolutely.
All right. State Senator Robert Martwick and Paul Vallas, thanks for the spirited discussion, and we'll be back with some final thoughts right after this.